Senator Kennedy goes on epic rant, forces Amy Klobuchar to sit there and take it. In a modest studio tucked away in the heart of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the air buzzed with anticipation as Brian, the host of the fiery political commentary show, Polit, adjusted his microphone and leaned toward the camera. His face, lit by the soft glow of studio lights, carried the intensity of a man on a mission. "Hey, y'all, and welcome to Polit." He began, his voice a rich blend of Southern drawl and unapologetic conviction, resonating through thousands of living rooms across America. "I'm Brian, and tonight we're diving headfirst into a scandal that'll make your blood boil, the shameless waste of your hard-earned tax dollars by a bloated, out-of-touch government." Thupper's Senator John Kennedy just unleashed an epic takedown in the Senate, torching Senator Amy Klobuchar and the Democrats' bizarre obsession with defending programs that sound like they were cooked up in a fever dream. Buckle up, folks, because we're about to unpack this mess. Brian paused for effect, letting the weight of his words settle over his audience. His show, Polit, had become a staple for those fed up with Washington's excesses, a platform where he wielded his sharp wit and unrelenting skepticism to hold the powerful accountable. Tonight's topic was a doozy, and Brian could hardly contain his excitement as he launched into the heart of the story. "Let me set the scene," he continued, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and outrage. Thupper Senator John Kennedy, that silver-haired bulldog from right here in Louisiana, stood up in the Senate chamber this week and laid out a laundry list of government spending so ridiculous you'd think it was satire. We're talking about your tax dollars money. You sweat for money. You sacrifice for being funneled into projects that sound like they belong in a bad comedy sketch. And who's defending this nonsense? None other than Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota, clutching her pearls and acting like these programs are the backbone of America's future. Let's dive into the madness, shall we? The studio lights seemed to burn brighter as Brian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "First up, let's talk about what Kennedy called spending porn stuff so outrageous it triggers your gag reflex. Picture this $3 million of your money going to produce Sesame Street in Iraq. Yeah, you heard that right. Big Bird and Elmo are apparently critical to rebuilding a war-torn country. Now I'm all for kids learning their ABCs, but $3 million to air puppet shows halfway across the globe. Come on, folks! That's not charity, it's insanity." The camera zoomed in on Brian's incredulous expression as he continued, his hands gesturing wildly to drive the point home. And it gets worse. The government's shelling out another $3 million to Zambia for what now circumcisions and vasectomies. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure the folks in Baton Rouge would rather see that money fix our crumbling roads or fund our schools. But wait. There's more, $500,000 to buy electric buses in Rwanda, $67,000 to give insect powder to kids in Madagascar. Insect powder. What in God's name is that? This isn't some summer camp dare where you eat a cricket for laughs. This is real money being spent on something nobody can even explain. Brian's voice rose, his southern accent thickening with every word as he rattled off the list. And don't even get me started on the $3.6 million we're sending to Haiti. You ready for this? Pastry cooking classes, cyber cafes, dance focus groups, and brace yourselves, support for male prostitutes. I'm not making this up, folks. Your tax dollars are funding this nonsense. And then there's $833,000 for transgender people, sex workers, and their clients in Nepal. Nepal, I mean, what in the world is going on here? Who's signing off on this stuff? Because it sure as heck isn't Congress. He slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing through the studio as he leaned closer to the camera. Senator Kennedy's point is crystal clear. This isn't just wasteful, it's a betrayal of the American people. These aren't decisions made by elected officials accountable to you. These are bureaucrats, unelected pencil pushers, taking the money Congress appropriates and blowing it on whatever pet project catches their fancy. And Kennedy's had enough. He's calling for a rescission, a fancy word for yanking back that money before it's spent on more of this lunacy. Across the country, in the stately halls of the U.S. Senate, the scene Brian described had unfolded with all the drama of a political showdown. John Kennedy, with his trademark folksy charm and razor-sharp intellect, had stood at his desk, a stack of papers in hand, his voice carrying the weight of 8 years in Washington. "Mr. President," he began addressing the Senate's presiding officer. "I've been here long enough to hear a lot of talk about reducing spending. Everybody says they want to do it. It's like saying you want to go to heaven. Raise your hand if you're ready to go today." A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber, but Kennedy's face remained serious. "Most folks want to live a little longer, and that's how it is with cutting spending around here. Everybody's for it until it's time to actually do it. Well, I'm done waiting. The American people are done waiting. We're spending their money on things like pastry classes in Haiti and insect powder in Madagascar, and it's time to stop." As Kennedy spoke, Amy Klobuchar sat across the aisle, her pen moving furiously over a notepad. The Minnesota senator, known for her measured demeanor and tireless advocacy, was not about to let Kennedy's rhetoric go unanswered. When her turn came, she rose, her voice steady but firm. "Mr. President," she began, hacking away at public broadcasting, and international aid isn't just short-sighted. It's dangerous. These programs aren't frivolous. They're strategic. Public broadcasting, like NPR and PBS, educates our children, informs our communities, and strengthens our democracy. And international aid. It's not about handouts, it's about protecting our national security. Diseases like Ebola, malaria, or bird flu don't respect borders. If we don't address them where they start, they'll come to our shores. We know this in Minnesota, where our Somali American community has seen firsthand the chaos in places like Somalia. When America shares its resources in a smart, targeted way, we don't just help others, we help ourselves. Klobuchar's words were met with nods from some colleagues, but Brian, watching the footage from his studio, wasn't buying it. "Oh, Amy Klobuchar's got a silver tongue, doesn't she?" he said, smirking at the camera. "She talks about national security, about helping communities. But let's be real, most of these programs are sacred cows for the Democrats. They're not about saving the world, they're about keeping their voter base happy and their pet projects funded. And let's not forget who's running the show at NPR. Catherine Marr, the CEO who got grilled in Congress for saying the First Amendment is a challenge because it makes it hard to censor content. That's not journalism, folks, that's control. And it's exactly why people are losing trust in these institutions." Brian leaned back in his chair, his mind racing as he connected the dots. To him, this wasn't just about a few $1 million here or there, it was about a deeper, more insidious agenda. "There's a reason they're pushing this stuff," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You've heard the phrases right. You will eat the bugs. You will live in the pod." They're testing the waters, folks. They're seeing how far they can push these ideas, whether it's insect powder in Madagascar or so-called 15-minute cities, where everything's under surveillance. This is about control, about a global elite trying to reshape how we live, and they're using our money to do it. But guess what? We're watching. The American people are waking up, and we're not going to let this slide. As the show cut to a commercial break, Brian's words lingered in the air. He urged his viewers to stay tuned, promising to dig deeper into the fight between Kennedy and Klobuchar. This isn't just about budgets, he said, his voice rising with passion. This is about who gets to decide America's future, you, the people, or a bunch of bureaucrats and elites who think they know better. Stick with us because we're just getting started. The camera panned out, leaving Brian's intense gaze fixed on the audience, a spark of defiance in his eyes as he prepared to take the battle to the next level. The U.S. Senate chamber in Washington, D.C. hummed with a tense electricity, the kind that crackles when ideas collide and egos clash. The polished wooden desks gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, and the air was thick with anticipation as Thupper Senator John Kennedy rose to his feet, his silver hair catching the light like a beacon. His weathered hands gripped a thick stack of papers, each page a testament to the absurdity he was about to unleash upon his colleagues. The Louisiana senator's voice, rich with the cadence of the bayou, carried a mix of indignation and folksy charm as he addressed the presiding officer. "Mr. President," he began, his eyes scanning the room, "I've been in this chamber for 8 years, and I've heard a lot of talk about fiscal responsibility. But talk is cheap, and the American people are tired of it. They want action. They want us to stop wasting their hard-earned money on projects so ridiculous they'd make a hog blush. So let's get to it." Kennedy's words were met with a smattering of chuckles from the Republican side of the aisle, but across the chamber, Thupper Senator Amy Klobuchar sat ramrod straight, her pen scratching furiously across a notepad. Kennedy held up his papers, his voice rising with each example. "Let's start with this $3 million to produce Sesame Street in Iraq. Now, I love Big Bird as much as the next guy, but are we really saying that puppets are the key to stabilizing the Middle East? And then there's $3 million for circumcisions and vasectomies in Zambia. I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure we've got bigger priorities right here at home. How about $500,000 for electric buses in Rwanda? Or $67,000 for something called insect powder for kids in Madagascar? I don't even know what insect powder is, Mr. President, but I'm betting the folks in Shreveport would rather see that money fix their potholes." The chamber erupted in laughter, but Kennedy wasn't done. He flipped a page, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "And get this $3.6 million to Haiti for pastry cooking classes, cyber cafes, dance, focus groups, and Lord help us, male prostitutes. $833,000 for transgender people and sex workers in Nepal. This isn't a budget. It's a circus." The room buzzed with murmurs, some senators nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably. Kennedy's point was clear. These weren't programs Congress had debated and approved in the light of day. They were the brainchildren of unelected bureaucrats, quietly diverting funds to projects that seemed to mock the very taxpayers footing the bill. "This is why I'm calling for a rescission," Kennedy declared, slamming his papers down. "We need to claw back this money before it's spent on more of this nonsense. It's gut check time, folks. You either believe in fiscal responsibility or you don't. And if you vote against this, in my opinion, you ought to hide your head in a basher." The chamber fell silent, the weight of his challenge hanging in the air. Amy Klobuchar, her face a mask of determination, rose to respond. The Minnesota senator adjusted her glasses, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Mr. President," she began, "I respect my colleague from Louisiana, but his rhetoric oversimplifies a complex issue. Cutting funding for public broadcasting and international aid isn't just short-sighted, it's dangerous. Programs like NPR and PBS are the backbone of our educational system, providing resources for communities that rely on them. And let's talk about international aid. Those $3 million for health programs in Zambia. That's about preventing HIV/AIDS, a disease that could spiral into a global crisis if left unchecked. The funding for Sesame Street in Iraq. It's not about puppets. It's about giving kids in a war-torn country a chance to learn and dream. And yes, even the programs that sound strange, like nutritional initiatives in Madagascar, are about tackling malnutrition in ways that could save lives. We can't bury our heads in the sand, Mr. President. When we invest in global stability, we invest in our own security. Klobuchar's words drew nods from her Democratic colleagues, but back in Baton Rouge, Brian was watching the live feed from his POLIT studio, his jaw clenched. "Oh, Klobuchar's good, I'll give her that," he said, leaning into the camera with a wry grin. "She's got that Midwestern charm, making it sound like every dollar we spend abroad is saving the world. But let's cut through the fluff, folks. Is she really defending the American taxpayer, or is she just protecting the Democrats' sacred cows? Because when I hear about millions going to pastry classes in Haiti or sex workers in Nepal, I don't see national security. I see waste." Brian's voice rose, his hands gesturing animatedly as he pivoted to another target, NPR, and its CEO, Catherine Maher. And let's talk about public broadcasting, since Klobuchar's so keen to defend it. NPR's run by Catherine Maher, who got dragged before Congress a few months ago for some pretty revealing stuff. This is a woman who said the First Amendment is a challenge because it makes it hard to control what people say. That's not journalism, folks, that's censorship. Dressed up in a fancy title, Brian pulled up a clip from Maher's congressional testimony, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he narrated. Here's Catherine Maher, former Wikipedia bigwig, telling Congress that free speech is tricky because it lets people say things she doesn't like. And this is the person running NPR, an organization that's supposed to be neutral, funded by your tax dollars. No wonder Kennedy's fed up. No wonder the American people are fed up. NPR and PBS aren't what they used to be. They're not about bringing us together anymore. They're platforms for a certain kind of ideology, and Klobuchar's out here acting like they're untouchable. Well, I say it's time to pull the plug. The studio lights dimmed as Brian leaned back, his eyes narrowing. He saw the clash between Kennedy and Klobuchar as more than a budget dispute. It was a battle over the soul of America. Kennedy, in his view, was fighting for the hard-working taxpayers, the folks in small towns who wanted their government to prioritize their needs. Klobuchar, on the other hand, seemed to represent a system that had lost touch, one that poured money into programs that sounded good on paper but crumbled under scrutiny. "This isn't just about dollars and cents," Brian said, his voice softening, but no less intense. "It's about trust. When bureaucrats take your money and spend it on things like insect powder or dance groups in Haiti, they're breaking that trust. And when senators like Klobuchar defend it, they're telling you they don't care what you think." Back in the Senate, the debate raged on. Kennedy, undeterred by Klobuchar's rebuttal, doubled down. "I've heard all the excuses, Mr. President," he said, his voice carrying a hint of exasperation. "Everybody wants to reduce spending, but when push comes to shove, they've got their pet projects to protect. Well, I'm here to say, enough is enough. The American people don't want their money going to male prostitutes in Haiti or electric buses in Rwanda. They want roads that don't crumble, schools that don't fail, and a government that respects them. So let's do our job. Let's cut this waste and show the people we're listening." As the session adjourned, the senators filed out their voices, echoing in heated discussions. Klobuchar huddled with her staff, planning her next move, while Kennedy was surrounded by reporters, his quips already making headlines. In Baton Rouge, Brian wrapped up his segment, his voice ringing with conviction. "This is gut check time, folks," he said, echoing Kennedy's words. "Kennedy's laid it all out there and Klobuchar's trying to spin it, but the truth is staring us in the face. We've got a government that's out of control, spending money like it's monopoly cash. Stay tuned, because we're not done digging into this. The fight's just beginning. The Baton Rouge studio of Polit was a hive of energy as Brian prepared for another broadcast. His desk cluttered with notes and printouts detailing the government's latest spending follies. The air smelled faintly of coffee and ink, and the glow of the studio lights cast sharp shadows across his face as he adjusted his tie and faced the camera. Brian's eyes burned with purpose, his voice a mix of righteous indignation and southern grit as he launched into his opening. "Hey, y'all! Welcome back to Polit," he declared, his words slicing through the air like a knife. "I'm Brian, and tonight we're picking up where we left off in the fight over your tax dollars. Thupper Senator John Kennedy's out there swinging, calling out the insanity of government waste, while Senator Amy Klobuchar's doubling down defending programs that sound like they were dreamed up in a mad scientist's lab. But folks, this isn't just about budgets. It's about who's really running this country. Let's dive in." Brian leaned forward, his hands gesturing animatedly as he pointed to a large chart propped up beside him, each line detailing a questionable expenditure from Senator Kennedy's now infamous list. "Let's recap," he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. $3 million for Sesame Street in Iraq. $3 million more for circumcisions in Zambia. $500,000 for electric buses in Rwanda. $67,000 for insect powder in Madagascar, whatever that is. And don't forget the $3.6 million for pastry classes, cyber cafes, dance groups, and get this, male prostitutes in Haiti. Oh, and $833,000 for transgender people and sex workers in Nepal. This isn't a budget, folks. It's a fever dream. And Senator Kennedy's saying, what we're all thinking enough is enough. The American people don't want their money spent on this nonsense, and he's pushing for a rescission to claw it back before it's gone. The camera zoomed in on Brian's face as he shook his head, his expression a mix of amusement and outrage. "But here's the kicker," he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "This isn't just about wasting money. There's something bigger going on here, something the elites don't want you to notice. You've heard the phrases right. You will eat the bugs. You will live in the pod. They're floating these ideas out there, testing the waters to see if we'll swallow it literally. That insect powder in Madagascar. That's not some random project. It's part of a push to normalize things most Americans would never sign up for. And don't get me started on the 15-minute cities they're talking about in Europe, where everything's under surveillance and you're never more than a short walk from Big Brother. This spending isn't just frivolous. It's a trial run for control, and they're using your tax dollars to fund it." Brian's words hung in the air, heavy with implication, as he pivoted to a solution he'd been itching to share. "Now, if you're as fed up as I am, there's a way to fight back," he said, his voice rising with conviction. "The system, central banks, surveillance currencies, social credit scores, it's all designed to keep you in line. They want a cashless society where every move you make is tracked. But there's one thing they can't control: physical gold and silver. That's right, folks, gold and silver are untrackable, uninflatable, and used in everything from electronics to medicine. Every ounce you own is a vote against this rigged system. No passwords, no blackouts, no third-party access. And you know what? The same governments telling you gold's outdated are hoarding it by the ton. Ask yourself why." He flashed a knowing smile, then added, "That's why we've partnered with Goldco, a company that helps you invest in physical gold and silver. Head to politgold.com to learn how you might qualify for free silver. It's not just money, it's resistance across the country in Minneapolis, Minnesota." Amy Klobuchar was taking a different approach. The The senator stood in a community center packed with Somali American residents, her sleeves rolled up and her voice warm but resolute. "I know some of you have heard about the budget cuts being proposed in Washington," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But let me tell you why these programs matter. The aid we send to places like Somalia isn't just about helping people there. It's about keeping our communities here safe. When we fund health programs like those for HIV prevention in Zambia, we stop diseases that could spread to our shores. When we support education in places like Iraq, we give kids a chance at a future that doesn't involve violence or migration. And in Minnesota, where our Somali American community is thriving, we know how instability abroad affects us at home." A woman in the crowd. Amina raised her hand, her voice trembling with emotion. "If America hadn't helped Somalia when I was a girl, my family wouldn't be here today," she said. Klobuchar nodded, her face softening. "Exactly," she replied. "These investments are small compared to the cost of doing nothing." Back in Washington, John Kennedy was relentless, his campaign for fiscal sanity gaining steam. At a press conference outside the Capitol, he stood flanked by reporters, his voice cutting through the crisp morning air. "I've listened to a lot of folks talk about reducing spending," he said, his southern drawl laced with exasperation. "They all say they're for it, but when it's time to act, they've got a project they can't let go. Well, I'm here to say, it's gut check time. The American people don't want their money going to pastry classes in Haiti or electric buses in Rwanda. They want a government that respects their sacrifice. I've been in the Senate 8 years, and I've learned one thing: you've got to watch what people do, not what they say. If you vote against this rescission, you're telling the American people you're okay with this insanity, and that's a shame." In Baton Rouge, Brian watched the press conference on a monitor, his fingers drumming on the desk. When Polite went back on air, he was ready to amplify Kennedy's message. "Kennedy's hitting the nail on the head," he said, his voice booming through the studio. "This is about accountability. These bureaucrats aren't elected. They don't answer to you or me. They take the money Congress approves and spend it on whatever they want, no questions asked. And when someone like Klobuchar defends it, she's not defending America. She's defending a broken system." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes blazing. "But here's the thing, folks. We can stop this. We can demand better. We can say no to insect powder, no to dance groups in Haiti, no to a government that treats your money like it's play cash. And it starts with us paying attention, asking questions, and holding these folks accountable." Brian's passion was infectious, his words a rallying cry for his viewers. He circled back to NPR, unable to resist another jab at Catherine Maher. "And let's not forget the folks at NPR who Klobuchar's so eager to protect," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Their CEO, Catherine Maher, roasted in Congress for saying the First Amendment's a problem because it makes it hard to control what people say. That's not the voice of a free press, that's the voice of someone who wants to control the narrative. NPR's not what it used to be, folks. It's not about serving all Americans anymore. It's about pushing an agenda. And we're paying for it." He shook his head, his frustration palpable. "This is why Kennedy's fighting, and this is why we've got to back him up. It's not just about saving money, it's about saving our democracy from those who think they know better than us." As the show neared its end, Brian's voice softened, but his intensity didn't waver. "We're at a crossroads, folks," he said, looking directly into the camera. "The system's not just broken, it's designed this way. Central bank surveillance, wasteful spending. It's all part of a plan to keep you in check. But we're waking up. We're seeing through the lies. And whether it's investing in gold to protect your freedom or calling your senator to demand accountability, you've got the power to fight back." So let's do it. Let's stand with Kennedy. Let's call out this nonsense. And let's take our country back. The camera held on Brian's face, his eyes alight with defiance as the screen faded to black, leaving his audience fired up and ready for the next chapter in this unfolding battle. The U.S. Senate chamber was a cauldron of tension, its high ceilings and polished desks unable to mask the raw emotion crackling through the air. It was the final day of debate on Senator John Kennedy's proposed rescission, a bold move to claw back what he called spending porn millions of taxpayer dollars funneled into projects so bizarre they seemed ripped from a satire. The Louisiana senator stood at his desk, his silver hair glinting under the chamber's lights, his voice a blend of southern drawl and steely resolve. "Mr. President," he began addressing the presiding officer, "the American people are fed up. They're working 2 jobs, scraping by, and watching their tax dollars get spent on things like $3 million for Sesame Street in Iraq, $3.6 million for pastry classes and male prostitutes in Haiti, and $67,000 for something called insect powder in Madagascar. This isn't what they signed up for. It's time we put a stop to this madness and show the folks back home we're listening." Kennedy's words echoed through the chamber, drawing nods from his Republican colleagues and murmurs from the gallery. He held up a thick binder, each page detailing another questionable expenditure. "This isn't about cutting for the sake of cutting," he continued, his voice rising. "It's about respect. Respect for the single mom in Baton Rouge who's wondering how she'll pay her bills. Respect for the farmer in Iowa who's praying for a good harvest. These folks don't want their money going to electric buses in Rwanda or dance groups in Haiti. They want a government that puts them first. I've been here 8 years, and I've heard all the excuses. Everybody says they want to reduce spending, but when it's time to act, they've got a pet project to protect. Well, today's gut check time. You either stand with the American people, or you stand with the bureaucrats who think this nonsense is okay." Across the aisle, Senator Amy Klobuchar rose, her posture calm, but her eyes fierce with conviction. The Minnesota senator adjusted her microphone, her voice cutting through the chamber's hum. "Mr. President," she began, "I agree that we must be responsible with taxpayer dollars, but my colleague from Louisiana is painting a distorted picture. These programs aren't frivolous, they're strategic. Public broadcasting, like NPR and PBS, isn't just about entertainment. It's about educating our children and strengthening our communities. The international aid Senator Kennedy mocks. It's about preventing crises that could cost us far more. Those $3 million for health programs in Zambia, that's HIV prevention, saving lives, and stopping a disease that knows no borders. The funding for Sesame Street in Iraq. It's giving kids in a war zone a chance at literacy and hope. And yes, even the nutritional programs in Madagascar are about fighting malnutrition in innovative ways. If we cut these blindly, we're not saving money, we're creating bigger problems down the road." The chamber buzzed as Klobuchar pressed on, her voice steady but urgent. "In Minnesota, we see the impact of global instability firsthand. Our Somali-American community knows what happens when countries like Somalia spiral into chaos, migration, conflict, disease. When we invest in stability abroad, we invest in our own security. Cutting these programs isn't just short-sighted, it's dangerous. We can't bury our heads in the sand and pretend the world's problems won't reach us." Her words drew applause from her Democratic colleagues, but Kennedy shook his head, unconvinced. With all due respect, he interjected, "The American people don't want to hear about long-term benefits when their money's being spent on pastry classes or insect powder. They want accountability now." Back in Baton Rouge, Brian watched the debate unfold on a monitor in the Polit studio, his fingers tapping restlessly on his desk. As the show went live, he leaned into the camera, his face a mix of frustration and resolve. Folks, what we just saw in the Senate is a microcosm of everything that's wrong with Washington, he said, his southern accent thick with emotion. John Kennedy's out there fighting for you, calling out this insane spending, $3 million for Sesame Street in Iraq, $833,000 for sex workers in Nepal, $3.6 million for dance groups and prostitutes in Haiti. It's enough to make your head spin. And Amy Klobuchar, she's standing there cool as a cucumber telling us this is all for our own good. But let's be real. This isn't about national security or saving the world. It's about a system that's lost touch with the people it's supposed to serve. Brian's voice grew sharper as he pointed to a chart behind him, listing Kennedy's examples in bold red letters. This isn't just about money, he said, his eyes blazing. It's about trust, or the lack of it. When bureaucrats take your tax dollars and spend them on things like insect powder or cyber cafes in Haiti without so much as a vote from Congress, they're spitting in your face. And when senators like Klobuchar defend it, they're saying they're okay with that. But here's the bigger picture, folks. This spending isn't random. It's part of a pattern. You've heard the chatter, you will eat the bugs, you will live in the pod. They're testing us, seeing how far they can push these ideas. Whether it's insect powder in Madagascar or so-called 15-minute cities, it's about control, and they're using your money to do it. Brian paused, letting his words sink in, then shifted gears. But this isn't just about pointing fingers, he said, his tone softening, but no less intense. It's about what we do next. Our democracy's in trouble not because of Kennedy or Klobuchar, but because we've let it get this way. We've let bureaucrats run wild. We've let institutions like NPR drift from their mission. Did you know their CEO, Catherine Maher, got hauled before Congress for saying the First Amendment's a problem? That's right. She thinks free speech makes it hard to control the narrative. That's not the NPR your grandparents listened to, folks. It's become a mouthpiece for a certain crowd, and we're footing the bill. This is why Kennedy's fighting, and it's why we've got to fight too. He leaned closer to the camera, his voice a mix of urgency and inspiration. Here's the lesson: democracy isn't a spectator sport. If we want a government that works for us, we've got to show up. We've got to ask questions, hard ones. Why are we spending millions on programs nobody voted for? Why are we funding institutions that don't represent us? And most importantly, why aren't our leaders owning up to their mistakes? The Democrats aren't wrong when they say democracy's at stake. They're just looking in the wrong direction. They need to look in the mirror, because this kind of wasteful, unaccountable spending is what's eroding trust. But we can fix it. We can demand transparency. We can call our senators, show up at town halls, and vote for people who put us first. Every step you take, every question you ask, is a step toward taking our country back. As the show drew to a close, Brian's voice softened, his eyes locking with the camera. Folks, this fight's bigger than Kennedy or Klobuchar, he said. It's about whether we're going to let a handful of elites decide our future, or whether we're going to stand up and say, not on our watch. So here's my challenge to you: pay attention. Dig into where your money's going. And if you're as fed up as I am, do something about it. Vote. Speak out. And maybe, just maybe, check out politgold.com to learn how gold and silver can protect your freedom from a system that's trying to control you. I'm Brian. This is Polit, and I'll see you next time. Stay awake, y'all. The screen faded to black. Brian's words, lingering like a call to arms, urging his audience to rise up and reclaim their voice in a fractured democracy.